Hi, welcome to this episode, Prophecy the Last Hour. My name is Liz McGee. I am going to take a bit of a tangent on a topic I've been teaching about. So I have been talking about the male and the female principle in the Godhead. This is a restoration of a truth that is coming back to us. For people, if you want to be biblically honest and accurate, do your homework. Whatever. It really is evident, apparent, that there is a female personification, all right, in the concept of the Godhead of Elohim, all right, his many personalities, many hats he wears. There is a definite feminine side. Now, I've been through a lot of this. So listen to the other teachers. I'm not talking about a separate goddess, a female goddess that we worship. All right. I'm going to get into this, how it denegated, how this concept has come filtered down and is coming back again, front and center, like a freight train at us. And because we don't have the necessary levels of understanding, we are getting totally bowled over again. Hasatan is just having huge impact again in the righteous remnant. And okay, so I'm going to take this tack a little bit different. We're talking about sex. I mean, okay, let me say this. Oh gosh. When you talk about the male and female, where do you always go? People, the sex. Oh my gosh, the carnality of the thing. It's just the brain, we're wired that way. All right. So I have to kind of unpack and explain this and sort of try to elevate. All right. We have to elevate this whole thing so we do not fall back down into the gutter, so to speak. But that being said, I do want to say that this is all leading up to concept. What I really want to do is again touch on and really try to disseminate an understanding that our ancients had as a working model that they used. This is the exegesis that our Hebraic brethren used, and the prophets used this, the tree of life concept. All right, this is ancient. So those ancient motifs, it comes from Enoch, and we have never really. No one's ever taught this to us, especially as Ephraimites coming back. So we have to get up to speed and not, as I always say, we're not going to do this as an occultist or some, Freemason Golden Dawn. This is a biblical quest that I'm on. So if you want to come with me, we're going Bible the whole way. All right. But one of the reasons why we have to get, a handle on sex and lust and what is going on, is because, and it just really, part of it is just a pastoral burden that, sex is killing the sexualization of our culture again, is tearing down our nation. It says that righteousness exalts a nation or an individual. But we've so lost our moorings. We have so lost any concept of what is really holy in Elohim's eyes, that we are, and we're just seeing it. Look at our government today. Look at what is going on all over the world. The carnality, the fall into gross darkness is just huge. And, just as an example, I teach watercolor. Some of the ladies in my class, and we were all talking at this point, a lot of people have grandchildren, women with grandchildren, and trying to buy clothing for their young girls. These are not Torah-keeping women. These are just normal women who are having grandkids, and, they want to go shopping with their granddaughter, and they're freaked out because the stores, it's, trying to buy a dress for a 10-year-old, it's all sequins and seduction. And they're even on, what's going on? Why would you want to dress a little girl like a siren? What is going on? Why this absolute preoccupation with the sexualization of our culture? So, and it's so important today because it's way near the end of the age, and there's a group on the planet called the 144,000, the elect. You want to be part of this group. All right, but there's some prerequisites. One of them, and I try to unpack this, the allegorical language here, is they have not defiled themselves with women. Well, what does that mean? We're not really talking about a bunch of male virgins per se, all right? There's a theological concept here. So anyways, you know, in Revelation, there's a very famous verse at the end of the book, and basically after it's all been laid out, and Elohim makes a point, or the writer of the book of Revelation, John, makes the point again that, look, at cowards, unbelievers, murderers, fornicators, the sexually immoral, idolaters, sorcerers, and liars will not inherit the kingdom of heaven. I mean, there are certain behaviors that have been with us since Cain, since the get-go, and it's been over and over stated all through Torah. These behavior patterns, if you don't get the victory, if they rule and reign in your body and in your soul, you are just, you know, it's just, graphically, it says you are a stench in Yahweh's nostrils. And something is you are not going to inherit the kingdom of heaven. But the two things we're talking about is different words, whatever you want, King James, fornicators, or, you know, more NIV, you want to go with, it's the sexually immoral. All right. This is something that we really have to understand from a biblical point of view. And so I'm not going to touch it, but and magic arts, the two things we really, and these are the things that are being shoved down our throat today, in the books, in the movies, in music, in everything in our culture. Our government is succumbing to this thing. Our schools are just, you know, licentiously giving it over to just any kind of lawlessness can parade itself in curriculums or whatever, but it has to do with magic arts and sexual immorality. So I want to start there. But, you know, there's a group today, since the Dead Sea Scrolls came out, called the Essenes. This group, Philo, you know, many people, Pliny, Philo, Josephus, many first century witnesses, historians, philosophers, bear witness to this group of people, the Essenes. We know them as probably more the Nazarenes. This is the righteous remnant that was alive at the time of Yeshua, that were the believing, just about what was left of the believing remnant of the house of Judah that was waiting for the Messiah and keeping a pure bloodline and living Torah. All right. And as people discovered more about this group, they're kind of they're over the top compared to us in the way, okay, with our lackadaisical church today, the way we live. It's like, oh my gosh, these people are like, they're like zealous, overzealous to the point of unreality. But in Qumran, you find these Essenes, these celibate Essenes. All right. So like, what's up with that? Other Essenes, you find out that many, you know, they do allow, there are certain branches of Essenes that do marry, but it's just for the reproduction of the race, so to speak. And there is this thread, this true biblical understanding of on opposition here. We have polar opposites of sexuality. You have holy remnant sexuality, so to speak, and you have the world, you know, it's a circus. And I'm going to unpack to such an extent what our texts are telling us, that because of the cleaned up wordage and the fact that we don't really understand biblical Hebrews, and we don't biblical idioms, and we don't really understand how, you know, there's two parts of the Bible that I just am over and over amazed and floored at, like how much understanding they had. And we don't give credit to the Bible for the words they're using that are displaying these quote unquote sciences today. The true nature of reality is so apparent. The ancients had, our patriarchs had, and this concept of what is going on behind the veil, the invisible worlds, the angelic realms, what we can know. They were much more. They didn't like deny it. They were totally, in many ways, 100% more up to speed than we are. So let me just, you know, enough of all that talk. Let's go into this now. So the Essenes, as I was saying, when you do understand, though, the level of righteousness that our Torah does expect, Yahweh asks for, and it's not a hard thing. And the contrast with the New Testament is like to not give in to the lusts of the flesh, you know, the pride of life, the carnality, all the bells and whistles in whatever category. Whether it's covetousness, you know, you got to have the latest, greatest, or the lusts of the flesh. This has always been something that the Torah has constantly talking about. But how does it relate to male and female in terms of the restoration of the concept in the Godhead. Now, let me just start with this, right? Because I don't think we've really understood it. It's taken me years. Because I did say that Yahweh did set up, the whole concept is of the male and female. You can keep it extremely in the physics of it. You take out all anthropomorphic concepts. It's just strictly a binary system, really, of engendering, of how to be fruitful and multiply, of how to reproduce, so to speak. All right. But there is a lot more to it. So in the Old Testament, it talks about how, well, you know, I just got to go here. We just got to go right into this. So the serpent, you know, where did this thing all start? What? All right. So, and I know I jump around people. I got a zillion different, you know, avenues to go down, which will be the easiest, the simplest. Because sometimes I'm like, I don't want to choke anybody. This guy said with the, I mean, even I'm like, oh my gosh, I had no idea it was this, this much down the rabbit hole you had to go. But there's 3 levels that our rabbis understood, the sages understood, the prophets understood, that the Bible is always written on. I've talked about the different levels, but it's on the different levels because we're a threefold being. We have a body, we have a soul, we have a spirit. But what that really breaks down to in Hebraic words, I've been through this a little bit. We have a body, we have a basar, we have a physicality. All right, nobody's denying that. We need to eat, we need to give it food, and we need to give it water. You know, we need to clothe our body. We got to stay warm if it's cold. We got to, you know, try to stay cool. Our body has built-in mechanisms that it needs, all right, to keep it going. But then inside of it, these are the invisible realms. You have this soul life. You have, in the first level of soul life we have is what is called the nephesh, which is the animal soul. It is really equated with the word behemoth in the text. You would know that, and I can't go too deep into this, but behemoth is sort of the animal soul. It's the intrinsic nature that is sort of a pre-programmed, sort of a, the first levels of animation that animate our vessel, our physical body. Okay, then you have what's called the neshama, which is your spirit, which is the first level of spirit that puts us the category totally above all the animals. All right, we have a nephesh. That's the breath. This is this higher working cognitive, functionative brain of ours that can, and coupled with our in our body, this whole thing, they created this thumb that we can do these things that we don't see any other species on the planet doing. But in the tree of life, there is one of the sephiriths, one of these theological constructs. It is called Yesod. It is equated to, on the tree of life. Now, like I said, the tree of life is an ancient motif. It predates the nation, and I believe that this is a true outworking of understanding that was gleaned from Enoch, from the righteous remnant. Now, flip side, you understand there's always a flip side. Satan is kind of working in the same cosmos we are. I mean, it's not like he's here too with us, and but he profanes, he takes everything and he's trying to spin it to create a worldview, a web, a nexus that suits his purposes. But our Father gives us what we are told is the emret, the truth. All right. And that's what we're going to stick with our biblical narrative. But when you get down to this concept of foundation, or yesed, on the tree of life, as I've always said before, you have this concept that in this theology, the body is a template, all right, or an archetype, is an archetypal image of, sort of how this whole cosmos runs. So in other words, there are the brains at the top. There is highly intelligent, there is the Father and the Son. This is where, the divine feminine, the divine masculine, there's a place at the top, the brains of this operation. Remember, we have a left brain and a right brain, this whole thing that is running the show. You come on down more to the torso, you have a trunk, if you're going to make it out to tree, you have a trunk, you have a left hand and a right hand with great capability. See, this is, if you're going to be a creator or an artisan or a craftsman, you got to have hands. This is where you get into the middle level of the Sephirot tree. All of these things are telling you this is where things get made and formed and fashioned and really become to have shape. all right? A thought, you don't really see, it doesn't have shape. You don't even know if it has shape or not. We won't know it, all right? But when you start to get into things that are formed, you can begin to give a little likeness, image. These are the words that are used. When you get down to actual manifestation, then you actually know, oh, we were talking about a tree. It's a tree, all right? But in this, so if you take man as his 2 feet are on the ground, his hands are in the soul category. The other thing this relates to, another way to relate to this whole concept is you have your physicality, your carnality, the world you can see, and then you have the appetites of the flesh. There's so many words and images and pictures. We talked about this level of existence, all right? But you also have what's known, your soul life is known as the astral plane. And this is something that we need to get up to speed on, because the astral plane is a real, there's a couple of heavens involved in this thing, the astral worlds, all right? Our Bible tells us very explicitly a lot of stuff, information about this that just kind of goes over us, all right? And we interact constantly in our thoughts, and we're constantly being bombarded in our mind by astral entities, fallen angels, negative energy sources. You know, this is where they say the battle's in the mind, in this astral plane of ours, the soul. You know, I always say Yeshua came to save our soul. That's what really, when I get down to that, fell. So anyways, and then you have higher dimensions where we're getting, you know, more and more into the ethereal category, up into the mind of Elohim, up to our, you know, our Heavenly Mother, Heavenly Father, Hokmah and Bina. That's a very safe place to be. That's where the believer, the true Torah-keeping believer, functions from. That is known as the mind of Christ, all right? But there's some so anyways, the divine phallic, all right? A body's got parts to it, all right? One of the parts, let's be honest here, people, and this is the rabbis, we're not shy, or let's just say the sages. I know, and I use the word rabbis. I don't care. It means a teacher. I'm a rabbi. You know, if a teacher, I don't get hung up on these things. I think there's much deeper levels that are said. So, I mean, if you're anti-Semitic and you can't stand, you know, you think that all Torah-keeping Jews are whatever. Okay, so you just have an issue, and I think you need to deal with it. I do believe that to the pure, all things are pure. So I don't mind using the word rabbi. It doesn't offend me. I don't espouse. I just think there are Torah people who love to learn Torah and to share it and teach it on different levels. So anyways, the serpent, there's always read in the literature, and I've read it everywhere. I've read it in Targums. It is in our text, our quote unquote 66 book canon. It's in the Talmud, it's in the Mishnah, it's in so many places. This concept of the serpent and Eve copulating, all right? So this, if you're offended by this doctrine called the serpent seed doctrine, you know, I don't know what to tell you. It is rather alarming. It is, I'll tell you, it's very disturbing, actually, to think that this is the adult level truth of what the garden story is telling us, all right? That there was a copulation that went on between 2 beings who were not supposed to. Remember, everything was supposed to reproduce after its kind. Well, these are 2 beings, 2 living entities, part of different angelic orders, different realms, whatever you want, that were not supposed to mate, okay? But they did, and it had huge ramifications, all right? I mean, we'd be a lot better off in the world if Abraham did not engender a child with Hagar, if Sarah didn't, okay? But it happens, all right? This is free will. Volition has done some real major things in the course of time. But the serpent began, there is this saying that that the serpent came upon Eve and he injected lust into her. Now, I've read this over and over. I'm just going to read it to you from about, so you know I'm not making this up, from a bunch of different texts here, all right? So Rabbi Johanna stated, when the serpent copulated with Eve, he infused her with lust. That's from Yebanoth 103b. Another rabbi states, thus I have learned that when the serpent had intercourse with Eve, he injected defilement into her. Hayasara 126a. Lastly, another replies, you rightly said that when the serpent had carnal intercourse with Eve, he injected into her defilement. That is from a book by Scott Stinson called The Serpent and Eve. All right. Another ancient commentary gives a similar interpretation of the same passage And Adam knew his wife Eve. Let me read this right. Because a lot of times, you know, we put the punctuation in the commas where we think they go. We add a lot of pronouns and that we think should be there. But let's just kind of read this in the context of what we've already read. And it says, Adam knew his wife Eve had desired the angel, because he's called the angel Samuel. All right. And she conceived and bare Cain. And she said, I've acquired a man, okay, or an angel from the Lord, an angel of the Lord, one of the Lord's angels. You know, I just conceived by. All right, basically what she said. That's in the Palestinian Targum. It says that way in a Palestinian Targum, Genesis 4:1. In another rabbinic work, we find a similar interpretation, and it says, and she saw that his likeness, meaning the child that she had just had, was not of earthly beings. All right, so, but of the heavenly beings. And she prophesied and said that she had gotten a man from the Lord would be an Elohim, a God. Another, I've been through all this, how you got to understand, another spiritual being. All right. Another rabbinic source states that Eve bore Cain from the filth of the serpent, and therefore from him were descended all the wicked generations, and from his side is the abode of spirits and demons. It's other words known as the seed of the serpent. It says it in Genesis 3:15, everything went down, you know, and this is our wordage. And I'm not going to, there's a lot of people unpacking this online. I've done all my research. There's no way you can get around it. There is definitely a lineage that came forth from a copulation through Eve and this being called a serpent, which is not a snake. It's a nakash. It's a bright, shiny, it's an angelic ordered being. Okay. And, you know, I don't want to tell it. I can't teach every little detail of this thing in this, but if you really work your words, that's what you'll find out. So in another rabbinic work, it says that a similar explanation for the evil deeds of Cain's lineage is found elsewhere. We read that for two beings had intercourse with Eve, and she conceived from both and bore two children. Each followed one of the male parents to this side and one to the other, and similarly their characters. On the side of Cain are all the haunts of the evil inclination. All right, and we know that from the side of Abel. Well, we don't really know what would have, because Abel got killed pretty early on, but it was 120 years later afterwards that we had another righteous line that is very clearly stated. There's no question that this was any hybridization or hanky-panky going on, that Seth's parents came from a union, a holy union between Adam and Eve. All right, and that's from where it stemmed the righteous remnant today. So this is, like I said, they're not making it up. I'm not making it up. It's there. It says here in the Babylonian Talmud. Now, this is what I want to talk about. Why are adulterers lustful? Because they did not stand at Mount Sinai. For when the serpent came upon Eve, he injected a lust into her. Now, this is what has to be understood, because I've always said that words have many levels of meaning. So you just can't take one level meaning and then just close the book and say, okay, that's all there is to ever know. This is what we do. Eve is a code word for many different levels of meaning. Eve, we know, obviously there was a first woman, the first woman taken out of Adam. So when literally when he made man in our image, you know, male and female, and then he literally split off the two components of this thing, you know, female to one side, male to the other side, and it started a system for these particular species of what's called literally asexual reproduction. All right, to be fruitful and multiply as an Adamic, as from this species, it's called asexual reproduction, which means you take you have to have two partners that come together, that donate their DNA, and they make a third. That's the, okay. Now, so that's one level of Eve, but Eve is also a code word for the whole human race, because we know, you know, it says that Eve, because she was the mother of all living. At this point, everyone who was engendered through this asexual process, and that would include Cain through even the Nakash. That's an asexual. So if you go and study this, there's different types of reproductions, all right? But in the higher ordered beings, all higher ordered beings, animals, we have an asexual reproduction system going on here, all right? That's your biology lesson today. The idea is that the serpent infected Eve, and here's a word, it's for the human race. Now, this is where I want to give what I consider to be some cutting edge understanding here, all right? Because I think a lot of people have unpacked, and there's good biblical documentation, as offensive as it is, that this is our problem. This is why Yeshua had to come, why a deliverer, a savior, someone had to come and rectify this cross breeding. See, this was the first hybrid cross breeding, the top, okay? We had a problem. And to make a way, an entrance for all to become whole again, all right? Because we know no uncleanness, no impurity. That was an impure strain. See, these words aren't used, they are used moralistically, but we can keep it in a almost a clinical moralistic sense, I guess I'd say. So things that are impure, they can still serve Yahweh. This is the point, because everything has volition, but there are streams of impurity. This is not, they are not engendered, they're not, we're getting mixture. This is the whole idea, forbidden mixtures, all right? And the further and further away you get in mixtures and impurities, the more and more it gets away from the original archetype, well, I'm trying to say this because I think I've been saying it wrong, archetypical, oh my gosh, forget it, concept, all right? But this is why when you understand Eve on the level of, she is a word, Eve is a word, like Adam is a word, talk Adamites, the whole human race. Well, Eve is another word that is used coded for the whole human race. This concept of lust, all right, is now poured in. This is what the sages are telling us. And this is what it means to eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, all right? And this is where I want to go. So we know that in a actual physical a union happened which produced an offspring. We had an asexual reproduction moment happen. And there's a lot in this. There's a lot of stuff. And the more you read, like the word beguile, that Eve was beguiled. And I have one, and I do want to get to this. Let me just make sure I've got this one, because I came across something that's really, really interesting about, because there's a lot of components, like, you shall be as gods. Like, again, there's a lot of phraseology. Like, what are these people talking about? Like, there's so many components. But back to the point where of lust, like I said, so on the body level, yeah, she got pregnant. All right, that's what. But it starts in the soul. There's a progression for sin. There's always a progression, and everything happens to happen in all different levels of our body. Nothing happens in a vacuum. So your hand can never say, well, your hand never acts independently. Let me put it this way. You go to steal something, it isn't like your hand needed to grab that pack of gum. All right, your hand, it doesn't need anything. It's the soul life in you. There's something in you that is making you steal. All right, so our body, that's why they're called instruments. They're tools. Like I said, the hands, that's what makes us craftsmen. Okay, we can make things, but we can do things. And a lot of things we do are not necessarily always good. We can do bad things. That's the whole point. But in the mind, it's why Yeshua said, for out of the heart are the issues of life. Our sin nature begins it's a progression down. So the serpent, and again, this is the typology is such that the serpent is an angelic order, a fallen angel. Actually, we know his name. Now it's Godriel. All right, he is one of the fallen angels. He shows up again in Genesis 6. He's listed in Enoch. He has actually a history. You can find him mentioned in a couple places. Godriel, he is, so when Lucifer, Hasatan, devised an evil scheme to try to take Adam and Eve down, he, looked around his kingdom. He felt, well, I'll try this. I'll try the Nakash character. He might be my willing tool. All right. And that's why it says he rides the serpent. Okay. So it's other words, it's the same concept. I mean, usually like an evil dictator is possessed by really horrible demonic entities that are using him as a vehicle in the world to create great evil, harm, havoc, bloodshed, all this evil thing. All right. Every evil work, same principle. So you have really behind this thing is Hasatan, and Hasatan is devising, he knows Eve. He has to devise a strategy that will get her to think of disobedience, consider disobedience, and finally act on the disobedience, because it's all got to happen simultaneously, but it's all got to filter from the top down. All right, you just don't do an act. There's premeditation. You do. So in this level, and this was a really big premeditated sin, and this gets into the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And trees are depicted as, are living beings. They're living ecosystems. And again, they have many levels of meaning. But these trees of life and tree of knowledge of good and evil, we're talking really, and again, in the tree of life, when I can get to this huge, it's even too big to go here, but the left side, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil is a word for it to talk about the left side, all right? Angelic orders that are created, and that's where also the fallen angels hang out, all right? Because on the left side, but there are good angels on the left side, and I've talked about this, they're the policemen. These groups of angelic orders, they have an understanding of the cosmos that is different than the way Adam and Eve were created. Adam and Eve were created in a very blissful, pure state. They didn't even think about that you could disobey Yahweh. It wasn't even on their radar yet. They were created as living beings who were just full of the glory of Elohim, saw his whole creation. It says that Adam, because of the light that he had, supernal, could see all the way from physicality all the way up to the high heavens of the throne room. Just could see it all. He could totally interface. This was the archetypal depiction of how their fellowship was completely transparent. All right. And they were in bliss. All right. They enjoyed everything, the garden and fellowshipping with all the other angels and worshiping at the different times with the angels. All right. But this gets into that's the right side. This is why it's called the right side of blessing. It's a place of bliss. And, usually if you are a Torah keeping person, this is the point. You can't get touched by these left side angels, okay, per se. You don't need to interface with them. You only need to interface with this left side kind of concept, the curses and blessings. On the right side, you got blessings, left is if you do something wrong. All right. Or this is where temptation comes. These energies, whatever you want to call them, angels, energies, thoughts, that come at you, that have the ability to entice. They're literally, they're so many of the words, cunning, beguiling, and they're sorcerers. They can change. And gets into the whole concept of sorcery, how, I don't want to get too back, sorcery, magic, things, how your mind can become enticed and you can see things that aren't really, you don't see clear. It just there's all these tactics, whatever. My point being, this is where Hasatan hit Eve first through the serpent, all right? She's looking at him, he looks like another tree in the garden, okay? He's an angelic dude, all right? And you read all these different literature, and some of them are much more graphic than others. That's why I said this is a mature level. I did want to say this at the beginning. If you got little kids in the room, send them out. If I can go as deep as I want to go, this is really a rather mature teaching series I want to do that you really should keep out of the earshot of babes and those that are still on milk, because it'll just choke them. No doubt about it. All right, but back to this. When the serpent came upon Eve, he injected lust into her. The idea that the serpent infected Eve, or in this effect, Eve is a code word for the human race with lust, from which, however, all right, and this is what happened. See, and I've been through this a lot, all right, that understanding the Mazar, understanding the different heavens, understanding how one heaven engenders another heaven, which contains all the heavens above it. And this is in the sense of physics or physicalities, or they're called garments. So by the time you get down to physicality, there's so much unseen in the seen realms. You can deny this as much as you want, but the truth of it is so evident, really, to any. So in other words, this is one of the best things. I don't know if I can say this. All right. I don't even know if I can completely articulate this. But why would it say, hence it is written, and the woman saw that the tree was good for eating, and that it was lust to the eyes, and the tree was lovely to look at, and she took of its fruit and ate, and she also gave to her man, and he ate. All right. And she saw how basically plausible the words of the serpent were. Now, what was this that you shall be as gods? What was the serpent trying to say to her? All right. And this is a philosophical understanding that we are clueless to, but the ancients understood this. And this is in the story. So Eve was Adam was her partner. All right. So it wouldn't even occur to her to commit adultery, right? I mean, he really didn't hit her on that level. He hit her on the level of two things, of lust and of this of you shall be of gods, all right? Now, the lust comes into this fact when you really unpack a lot of these words. The woman saw that the tree was good for eating and that it was lust to the eyes. Tree is a phallic symbol. I mean, I could probably say, I mean, just you're an adult, you figure it out. Trees are phallic symbols in one sense. That's one level of them. That's an Asherah pole, all right? I mean, think about this. The obelisk, all these upright, I mean, there's so many words the Bible uses, but it usually works in terms of upright, erect. See, you know, and we're talking about, you know, a phallic ready to all right, inject its filth. Really, because its filth is from the sage's point of view, or our point of view, that filth was not Adam. It was not the correct genetic mixture, all right, from which Eve should be engendering children into the world, all right, quite frankly. And you know why this is so disturbing? And why is it? Because you know that movie that just won the Academy Award, The Shape of Water. I'm like, we are absolutely clueless sheep going to the slaughter. Oh my gosh. Anyways, all these words, if you want to do the homework and biblically study these out, many of the words, eating is a euphemism for taking into yourself, you know, foreign DNA material. It's one of its through. All right, now lust. Let me talk about this. And she took its fruit and ate. Now, the Maseroth, the way the system is wired so far at this point, okay, we're the highest order creation. We are told to be fruitful and multiply, but we are not to multiply, be fruitful and multiply like an animal does. An animal is ruled, the animal kingdom and the plant kingdom, all right? These, and there's a lot of asexual reproduction in the plant kingdom, all right? These species engender. And on a deeper level, to tell you, cobras, we're all talking about angelic orders, all right? There's gendering in many of the angelic orders, and they do it according to the seasons of the Maseroth. You ever heard of mating seasons, all right? The phases of the moon. This is the Maseroth is a system that Yahweh set up in which turns, you know, for everything there is a season. This concept that even for mating, even for gender reproduction or species reproduction, there are seasons, and it is done this is why they're called behemoth, the cattle. It's done on that level by carnality, just by instinct. So, you know, there's certain season where you start to see, you know, the herds come together and the bulls and this, you know, and they fight for supremacy over the female. We're looking at what they call these mating rituals that you can see going on in the animal kingdom. This is all being played out because of the influence of the Maseroth, because they are being influenced, all right? And it's a good thing. You know, he said it's good. I mean, we have to have reproduction. It's a system that will keep going on and on forever if it had originally stayed pure and doing everything, staying within its kind and doing its thing without any, you know, disobedience. But that's not the story. But there's still much of it, much of the creation. That's why it is still so beautiful. Much of it is so faithful still to Yahweh's original Torah setups. We see this season going on, you know, season after season, his faithfulness. And this has to do with the earth and its fertility. It does reproduce itself. You know, winter gives way to spring, which gives way to fertility, which gives way to new growth, to fruit, to produce, to abundance, to the re-sustenance of all of the creatures that are in the creation, all right? Everything gets its food in due season, all right? But above the Maseroth, you understand, it's a fourth heaven kind of thing. You have like the sun, the moon, and the planets, and this is something we're just going to have to understand, which I believe true science finally is going to reprove all this stuff. The influences of the heavenly bodies closest to us, all right? I mean, it's very unlikely to me, this, you know, I do believe these heavenly bodies are way closer. That's, you know, I don't really believe everything NASA, never a straight answer. I don't know that I ascribe to a much really simpler and ancient worldview on a lot of this stuff. But my point is, beyond that is the intelligences that are running the star systems. All right. So you, like we have, like I said, my body, my hands are moving because my mind, I actually have control of them. All right. It's coming from a higher ordered part of my soul life that's making my mouth move, my hands move, my head, whatever. All right. All right. I'm not having epileptic fits here. You know, it's something. See, so you have to understand there's always a vessel, but there's always higher ordered programs running. And this is the same principle. It's an archetype that's been set up and it always works. So behind these, so this is the idea of the Nakash being a little bit lower than Hasatan. Hasatan is sort of like the man behind the curtain, the brains behind the operation is using one of his fallen created beings to sort of do his dirty work. All right. Basically that's it. And he is engaging Eve. All right. Adam is not there. Now, this is a very interesting point. I don't think I understand all this really. I mean, I'm doing the best I can, and I'm imparting because I think it's extremely important. We have to get up to speed, people. We really do. We're never going to save our children and the generations if we don't have an answer for them. Why is sexual purity important? Oh my gosh, most people can't even give an answer to people anymore, all right? As you understand this concept that's going on, Satan he's concocted a great scheme. He is going to go after Eve, all right? And you know it's all because of jealousy and because he will not submit to this Adamic man that was created way later than him. There's a whole bunch of stories to this, and I can't go into every single one, but it's all there. The thing is, when it says that the serpent infused Eve into lust into Eve, he is a behemoth. He is a lower level creature, all right? Adam's at the top. So anything that comes at her that's not Adam or Adam is a lower ordered being, all right? So he's a behemoth. He copulates in his season, all right? Maybe he came out, maybe Satan waited till his total season, right? You know, but this is the point. And you know, this is the point of DNA mixing. You put two DNAs together, you're going to get, there's mixture, all right? So the next offspring is going to have some of its, the male part and the female part, all right? And this is exactly what we see in the story of Cain, all right? And why I said before that there were two parents and that one exhibited the attributes of one male parent or one male pairing and the other of the other, okay? But what he says is this is what lust is, a lower ordered program functioning. We were not supposed to reproduce, be fruitful and multiply according to the lustful. And see, lust, again, if you want to use it in a more clinical way, doesn't always have to be bad, because the animal kingdom, you know, yeah, you watch it and they look very, but it's necessary for reproduction, right? It's necessary to keep the species going, to keep the whole ecosystem moving, and that everybody can have food in its season, all right? So in one sense, it's not a bad program, so to speak, to be running in certain categories of your created beings, all right? But when you start mixing programs, people, this is the problem. So infusing into lust, and this is what we have been dealing with ever since. We are a people now that, and I want to give you a perfect example why, when you know what, you understand this theology, you can hear it. Like here's Yeshua saying, he goes to John 8:40, he said, but now you are trying to kill me, a man who has told you the truth that I hear from Elohim. Abraham never did such a thing. Now he's talking to, you know, what I believe are Pharisees, but I think these are Idumean Pharisees, all right? These are definitely, and if you understand the whole Canaanite line and how they infiltrate and weasel their way in, and then they parade among the righteous, all right? Here you have, he's saying, Abraham never did such a thing. You are doing the works of your father, okay? Yeshua said to them, If Elohim were your father, if my father was your father, you would love me because I come from him and my own know me. I have not come, and I haven't come out, and he sent me, and you would recognize that. And you would see my fruit. He's always saying, look at, if you don't believe me, believe the fruit. Look at, I healed the sick. I'm doing unbelievable works of righteousness among the people. All right. And they're all freaking out. And they say, and I believe these are Idumean Pharisees are saying, we're not illegitimate children, they declared. In other words, they're like, what do you say? What do you say? We're not born of fornication. We're not like these, they have another word, beasts of this field. We are not born of the lust of the flesh. In their own minds, they could be totally deceived and thinking, well, no, we're part of these righteous, teaching Levi line that's going all the way back. We're not illegitimate children. But Yeshua is like, look you shall know a tree by its fruit. If you do the works of darkness, then you obviously are coming from the tree of of darkness. All right. Another name sort of for the left side darkness, your deeds are evil, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. All right. I mean, that's exactly what's going on in that little conversation. And if you look at it, you were doing the works of your father. The word of is the word. It totally means begotten, generative. They were engendered. So anyways, just a little digression there. All right, I want to get back to this. So I'm trying to explain the last part. So all of a sudden now we have a species of hybrid people on the planet that they have the genes from reproduction according to a lustful mazel. Okay, I hope you guys can follow me and understand a little bit what I'm saying, all right? And that's a real problem. If this people group, these Canaanites, start reproducing, with other quote-unquote Adamites, we're going to get this crazy mixture. This now comes a mixed multitude, and this is the whole point. This is what's been starting to go on. But the last part I want to say, and this is really deep, you shall be as gods. All right. Now, one of the things is we don't really have a proper understanding of the way that the texts are using the word gods, Elohim. All right. Little g's. He calls them his chiefs. There are, like I was talking before, about the 70 angels, the 70 chiefs, the 70 shepherds that are the gods over the nations. This group of really fallen angels that finally Elohim he just gave the Gentiles over to them and said, look, you want to live kind of like under the mazal of these gods, fine. You guys have each other. All right. It's basically what he did. He said he went on and worked with his righteous remnant. Basically, he formed the nation of Israel with a righteous seed, a nation, and they had all these purity laws, in terms of sexual reproduction, where they were supposed to try to keep themselves pure and separate from the nations. All right, for a certain time, so that he could send this promised deliverer basically through. All right. The thing that's interesting in this whole plan of salvation that's going on, if you would understand these things, Yahweh doesn't do everything at once, obviously. Many times he answers your prayer in stages. If you've ever been around for a while, you'll see that. When Yeshua came, as Messiah ben Joseph, the good shepherd, who is now going to go out and find all these quote unquote lost sheep that were mixed now in with the Gentiles, which was the 10 tribes, the northern kingdom. And at this time, there was so much mixture, somebody could be, 20% Adamite and the rest mixture. I mean, who knows? Because we have had a lot of incursions. I've been through a lot, as a lot of people have. I'm assuming you're up to speed on this whole concept. Anyone now who wants to receive Yeshua as the propitiation, the payment, and come in through Yeshua as the gate back into covenant, back into the fold, right? This was now the time of the nations. See, this is one of the things we have to understand is now we're in these last 2 days, and it's called the days of the Messiah. The days of this Messiah was going to come back and now go after the people that were in the nations. It's all very orderly, very linear. He has it figured out. So this is an important season, but we're coming to the end of this season. So that's why it's really important, because Satan is just trying to take so many people out through this concept. I mean, he has really, the level that lust is running the programs in people today, and all the way down to our little children. is so disturbing. It's almost leaving no room, and it's making hard, for the elect to be pure. Now, back to this concept of you have to know the gods. Now, one of the principles, when you understand the tree of life, you understand this whole process of engendering, all right, this whole process of reproduce, of simplicity, of complexity, of creating just this incredibly diverse physicality, this world we have. And most of us, I've said this before, the first three heavens, earth, the three heavens. Earth is also a code word. Eve is a code word. Let me say this, all for the worlds of physicality, all right? They're many times used synonymously. So, but what happens is, like I said, the world that is above you, so is this process, and this is the process of emanation, this is the process of flux, of flow, there's so many words to describe it, of how Elohim, the essence of Elohim, is filtering down into everything. He's creating worlds. He's filtering down, all right? But every world, so the last world, is really a compilation of all the worlds that are above it. So there's a phrase here. Let me say this. The serpent began speaking to Eve in the word Lashon Hara, which is a word we know for slander. It's of the creator saying, of his creator saying, oh, of this tree did he eat and then create the world? Hence he orders you not to eat from it. All right. So what he is saying, for every person hates his fellow craftsman. Rabbi Yehuda argues, he says, look at whatever was created after its companion dominates it. See, this is a key too, because Eve, this is why Eve dominated Adam. She was in, this is why it's saying in some of the text that Eve was put there almost like as the final creation. She was the last thing created, let's say, and ended up being a trip up for Adam. All right. How do I keep this simple? Thus the heavens were created on the first day, and the firmament on the second day. Read Genesis is what it says. But then he goes on to say, but does not the firmament bear the weight of the heavens? So in other words, if you're having a structure, I guess this, you could relate this to the concept of a structure. You build a foundation, and then you build on it. And the foundation, if you flip this around, so it has to bear the weight of everything that's built on top of it. All right. So the foundation, let's just say he laid, we want to put the foundation on earth, but just let's flip it around mentally for a second. He created the heavens, and then he made the foundation for it, which is the firmament, and then the next world down. All right. But when it got to Eve, it was done. That was the end of all the creation. All right. He made the man Adam, but then he separated him, and he really kind of took them apart, and he started this, that you particular little species of race of Adamites, you're going to reproduce asexually. I got your Eve over here and your Adam over here, and that's how it's going to happen. All right. But he's saying to the woman, he said, you were created after everything in order to rule over everything. So not Eve, but because I don't want to say that Eve was created. Adam and Eve were created last, and they were told that they would then rule over everything, because the thing is also a circle. So then they were elevated all the way back up to the top. That's what really got Satan mad. And now they were put over to rule over everything else. And that put Satan under this Adam. And that was just not going to fly with him. All right. But he says, and you were created after everything in order to rule over everything. Make haste and eat before he creates other worlds which will rule over you. So in other words, here he is playing this mind game with her, and is saying, well, now wait a minute, Elohim's not really good. Let me just tell you a little scoop you haven't thought of, Eve. If Elohim decides, or let's just say Yahweh Elohim, because this is the Lord God we're talking, Yahweh Elohim decides to create other worlds that will rule over you. All right. Hence, so don't think that you and Adam are the last things created, and that you're going to rule over everything forever, because, this is what I'm saying, I've been around longer, and something was created over me, rules, and so don't think that you're sitting pretty in the catbird seat forever. He's beginning to mess with her mind, and she's beginning to consider, well, maybe I should jump the gun. Maybe I should create, or because you understand, every time you're creating another human being. Let's face it, we're talking in the levels of creation here, all right? You're creating another life, all right? Which is sort of the same way of saying this. And the woman saw that the tree was good for eating and that lust of the eyes, and she took of its fruit and she gave it to the man. In other words, and he creates other worlds which will. So in other words, this was a subtle play to see if Elohim, so it's in other words, planting that doubt in your mind, is Elohim really good? He did the same thing with Abraham, in the sense of, Abraham and Sarah waited, I don't know, maybe it was 25 years for the promised child, and nothing was happening. So, Sarah is saying, well, maybe we should take things in our own hands and create our own world. Let's create our own offspring. I'll give you Hagar, have a child through her. Maybe that's how this thing is going to play out. This is not an unknown concept. Maybe Yahweh's really not good. Maybe he really isn't going to do it, or he's certainly not going to do it the way I want to, or he's certainly not going to do it on my timetable, all these kind of things. And we take matters into our own hands. And really you can see that Eve is beginning to buy into this illogical, but completely logical sense of, okay, this is the way it looks, right? I better take matters into my own hand. All right. And she engenders a world, an offspring from the Lord that she can rule over. See, there is a lot of stuff that's going on play here, a lot of theology that we just don't have. All right, so we make these very simplistic little statements, Eve ate an apple. What's that going to do for anybody today? We are so sophisticated, and our youth are so sophisticated. We have to have an answer. So what I want to do is I want to kind of flush this out to get back to this point, what it means to be ruled by lust, all right? And that this, first of all, created a huge problem, just as it did with Abraham, with Hagar, with the Ishmaelites, with the concept of you have a mixture of people going on who have different agendas, different programs running, different goals, all right? And this is where, and it also engenders death, because this is the other thing. The way Yahweh has originally set it up, if things are good and running in their correct order, in their great seas, things will run forever. He did create a cosmos originally, quote unquote, that would have hummed on forever, right? But it got the virus called Satan, called the Nakash, called the fall. He had to redeem his Adamite man, so the whole thing. But this is really important to understand, because today it is just so rampant, this concept that, because we are a higher order being, so we were never supposed to reproduce according to lower level carnal fleshly desires. That's why it's in our word, and that's why we have been called up to now an even higher standard, that if we're going to do that, we have to get above the serpent. We've got to get above this Mazra, this carnal level now, genetics of lust that is in our body, because I'll tell you, it's pretty strong. Ask anyone, any young person, all right, this is the problem. We are talking about something they say is as strong as a freight train, all right? It's, and if you think about it sort of clinically in its good ways, think how necessary it is to put strong instinctual drives into animal so they for reproduction, all right? But we didn't have to be, we're not wired that way. Ours is a much more beautiful, higher level, and this, oh gosh, I don't know if I'm going to get into this level of engendering, all right, that we have fallen. Oh, how from what a height we have fallen, all right? Our prototype, our Heavenly Mother and Heavenly Father is our prototype, which is completely based on love, of self-sacrifice, of full giving, full unity. It's a much higher, but because look at, and then the flip side is you flip over these passions, these this concept of lust and carnality, and it brings in every evil work. I mean, death and murder, crimes of passion. Just, and the saddest thing is the children, the offspring, who impure. I mean, it's a mixed multitudes of offspring. See, these are concepts that are very in our Bible. Theologically, we just don't have any clue, and it's so probably politically incorrect to try to talk about this. But this is what made the gospel take off like a rocket in the first century. I will tell you, for no uncertainties, because all of a sudden now the Gentiles got a hold of this vision and realized, you mean I won't be impure? I mean, you mean I can actually get back into the covenant that that Yahweh made with heaven and earth, which means with Adam and Eve, all right, and get into back up to the estate from which, because people understand this hierarchical thing. The ancients understood this hierarchical order, and that the Adamite, that there was an order at the top, all right, and that they could get in on this. That was like, that's the best news. Are you kidding me? Through believing in Yeshua. But the other thing is, and this is the flip side, why Torah was given as the antidote. The Torah is the antidote. And when I say Torah, you have to understand, I am talking about Torah not as the noun, meaning the 5 books of Moses. I'm using it as a word that is in its which is in its proper generic sense. It means instruction. Torah is the way in which you can be you can receive instruction and help and everything that you need to overcome what quote unquote now has become, and it's called the evil inclination. All right. So not only did lust come into us, but all sorts of bad traits from quote unquote this other quote unquote father, this whole left side. We became infected, so to speak, with all of the left side knowledge of good and evil. So now we could be preyed upon and become susceptible to all of the different Torah breaking you name it, if you can think it, you can do it on the left side, all right? And this has been the sad story of humanity. I just want to get a couple things quick. So it says here about Torah. So if a person comes to purify himself, and this was what was always open to anyone, this concept is really, it's in our text. And this is why even in the Noahide laws, the Gentiles, the mixed multitude, the nations were told, look, they had 8 commandments, basically. The only one they don't have is basically to love the God of Israel, because they were under their own gods, all right? But having to live according to a standard of sexual purity was just as much known in the ancient world among the Gentiles as it was even among Israel. Elohim does not change his mind. So where did I write this down? So not to indulge in incestuous, adulterous, homosexual, or pornea, child sex. I mean, this has been known to all the ancients, all right? And it was as known as much not to engage as this, as you can even study history and find out how much they did engage, and as we do today. It's just crazy. So if a person does, though, come to purify himself by a Torah, he is assisted from above. The Lord's assistance encircles him, and he is protected and called holy. This gives a lot of concept of why Paul would say in 1 Corinthians 7:14 that this concept that, because you see, one of the names of Yahweh Elohim is given to us is he is our Azer. He is our helper. All right. It says, for the unbelieving husband is sanctified through his believing wife, or the unbelieving wife is sanctified through her believing husband. Otherwise, your children would be unclean, but now they are holy. So, and this is a very important concept people understand. So that even a believing parent, even if one person in this asexual pairing is going on, is pure and prays with faith. Unfortunately, we don't think that he was doing that, obviously, praying for faith that the children can be clean, that they can be holy. All right. This is the point. We don't understand how merciful Elohim is. He is Hesed Echad. He is the kind one, the merciful one. There's another one here. It's this is the archetype of the story of Joseph. Hey, I'll tell you something. You should read the Testament of the 12 Patriarchs, which is sort of the last testament for each patriarch the 12 tribes wrote sons of Jacob, and Joseph. There's so much information in there. And Joseph's big thing that he overcame all of the advances by Potiphar's wife of lust. He is the archetypal of someone who wants to live pure and obey Yahweh and not give in to all the trip ups that a culture can throw at you for a sexual fall. But it says here in the Testament of Joseph, it says, and I struggled against a shameless woman, urging me to transgress with her. But the Elohim of Israel, my father, delivered me from the burning flame. Now, did you ever hear the concept, okay, burned with lust? I mean, this is the whole side. And the left side, too, is the side of fire. And again, it isn't fire like the campfire. I've been through this before. A lot of times that word is used, fire, of just of heated and stoked, almost out of control passions. This is how strong esh, fire, on the left side, and this and that's why it's paired up a lot of times with lust and the burning flame. All right, because again, remember I was telling you how the language is very concrete. They don't stay too intellectual. They really will give you very hard and fast, concrete things you can wrap your mind around, imagery or allegory of what's going on here. So we do have Torah. Torah, this is always the antidote. Now, let me see if I have time or whatever, how long I've been at this.